I always have this understanding that Indian society or Indian education system for that matter is not made to select candidates, it's made to reject candidates.
You don't have to be an Einstein to start. You can outwork your doubts.
You have to be able to visualize where you want to go, what is it that you're wanting to create, because everything is created twice, once in our brains and once outside.
Whatever you think is a disadvantage, whatever you think makes you unique in a way that you don't want to be unique, is exactly your superpower. That even with this ignorance, I succeeded. So think about what would you do with the wisdom that you have?
Really driving through a fog where you can see only 10 meters ahead, but you have to be faith that there is going to be a path even emerging even after the fog.
I have been blessed to have a very strong faith. I was not born this way, but there have been series of incidents in my life very much related to faith that has given me the belief to the core that nothing that is happening in my life is out of script. Everything has a purpose.
Hi, Aditi. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so happy to have you with us today to talk about your experience. And for people who do not know, I just want to give a quick introduction of what Aditi is. Actually, Dr. Aditi Paul. So, Aditi holds a PhD in communication studies, and right now she's working as a UX researcher with user design. So, I will leave it up to you, Aditi. How has your journey been so far? And if you can give us a little bit about what you have been doing so far.
Thank you again, Shivi, for inviting me on your podcast. I love the vision that you had for the community. The Working Women's Podcast is something that we need. We need more voices. We need multiplicity of perspectives so that everything seems normal. Because a lot of times when I was making my career choices, it seemed to me that, man, am I the only one? Am I the crazy one to do all of this? But turns out that I just didn't know enough women and I didn't hear enough perspectives to know that even though you feel like you're the only one, there is somebody on some corner of the world who has done something similar to you or is thinking of doing something similar to you. So, for you to have created this podcast and bringing those complexity and multiple voices together is such an incredible value add. About myself, oh gosh. I know it's a working women's podcast and you want me to inspire your audience, but let me start by saying that for somebody who ended up being a professor, I did not want to do anything in studies. I wanted to quit school in class 12. Actually, I wanted to quit school in class 10 because in India, we all decide our streams in class 10 and 12 where we are like, okay, this I'm going to study science for the rest of my life. And I got into science and I did not ever like science. I sucked at chemistry, and it didn't help that my dad was a chemical engineer because in class 11 I failed in chemistry. I got a 32 out of 100, that too in pre-boards. So that was my past. But the reason I say that to you is because when you hear somebody like, oh, she's a professor, she's a PhD, you always think that there is a consistent path of success and that you were always excited to do this. And for me, it wasn't. I did not want to study. I did not want to pursue computer science. I did not want to come to the US, and that's exactly what I did. Because one thing led to the other. And after graduating with a science background in class 12, fortunately or unfortunately got a 95 out of 100 in computer science. It helped that I went through the CBSE board, and the CBSE board computer science is much easier than the computer science and ICSE board. Maybe it has changed right now, but I got a 95 out of 100. And what does a kid who gets a 95 out of 100 think that she is good at? She thinks that she's a prodigy in this and she wants to study this. And that's what computer science was for me. So I got a bachelor's in computer science, but very soon I realized that, man, I don't like this. I was very, think about that. Do you remember Kuch Kuch Hota Hai? Do you remember that kid who says, "मुझे singing और dancing का बड़ा शौक है." So I was that kid. I was so excited, and I was so active in extracurricular activities. I kept my grades up so that my mom and dad would never stop me from extracurricular activities. And these extracurricular activities consisted of like extemporaneous speech and debate and mock parliament, all of this, as I was doing something as hardcore as computer science. So I always had that knack toward communication studies, and I felt like a fraud doing it because all my other friends who were doing computer science, they were very like pure computer science, and here I was, this outcast who was doing all of that. But I want you to keep this in mind when, as you're listening to my story, that whatever you think is a disadvantage, whatever you think makes you unique in a way that you don't want to be unique, is exactly your superpower, is exactly that thing that sets you apart, because that's what happened to me consistently over the years. So when I was doing my bachelor's and master's in computer science, not feeling like I was fitting enough over there, when I did decide to make the jump to get a PhD in communication studies, all those things that made me feel like an outcast in computer science helped me to get into PhD in communication studies. And that's exactly what happened when I made the leap from academia to industry. When I went from a very academic role to now a role as a researcher in a computer science company, in a very tech company. So, all of those things that made me feel like, man, I don't belong enough. Not people who, with my background, are doing this. I'm not doing it. What is going on? In hindsight, I have realized that all those knickknacks, all those things that you think don't fit, all those things that make you feel like this weird puzzle piece in that puzzle that we call life, is exactly your edge. So I don't want it to turn into a very like TED talky spiel, but embrace the edges, embrace the weirdness in your profile, because and I've a lot of life to live more by the grace of God. I know that the things that are currently making me feel like I'm not fitting enough in this one mold is going to be my superpower moving forward.
It's so interesting, Aditi, and you touched upon so many interesting topics while talking about your journey and while talking about that you come from a computer science background. Even speaking about failure, which in really Indian society is something that is looked down upon, right? And I always have this understanding that Indian society or Indian education system, for that matter, is not made to select candidates. It's made to reject candidates. And the example that I always think about, that you could be a tremendously good robotic engineer. You created very useful and impactful projects in your class 10, 11, 12. But if you do not perform well in one examination, it does not matter. You cannot go to the top university, even though you might have been one of the top candidates to get into that university and really make an impact, right? So, um, how I think is that in India, the competition has become so extreme that basically we are running after those numbers in terms of that Marx mindset that we have to be at the top, and there is no appetite for losing. And even for me coming from India, coming from an academic background in India, I had very little appetite for losing, which basically meant that I was so scared of trying out new things, because what if I fail, and that's at the back of your mind, which is so interesting in your case, that you started to embrace that. Yeah, sure, failures happen, and that's exactly where I think life is almost like a game, right? Instead of an academic career, where in academics you can actually score 10 on 10. But in a game, if you playing tennis, if you are winning 50%, 51% of the total sets that you're playing, then you will be world number one or two or three. Versus in academia, if you don't get to a 10, then probably it does not matter. So you bring in such an interesting perspective, Aditi. Did you work in computer science prior to moving into your PhD program here in the US, or you moved directly? How was the move? How did you decide?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why I did my PhD. I told you, like, you can question my dedication to anything, but never question my dedication to not wanting to work, to not wanting to doing something. Because I started hating computer science so much in my second year. I should tell you that I graduated my master's first come first, like, not first come first, first class first. So first division first. I was shocked. But that just goes to show that, if you, even if you hate something, if it's so mechanical, like you said, that where dimag nahi lagana padta, like, you do the rote formula of okay, this is what it is. And in my masters, that was the case where I had to regurgitate a whole bunch of formulas and I puked it on paper, and it was more a test of my memory than my test of my competence. And I did emerge to be the top of the field in my master's program as well. But I hated it. I hated every bit of it. And I knew that I will graphic language, but I will shoot myself in the head if I had to ever sit in front of a computer and debug programs. I'm like, this is not my life. It cannot be my life. Good for people. I do not see myself sitting in front of a computer writing C++ programs and seeing that hideous blue screen that pops up because you missed a semicolon at the end of some writing code. And I'm like, Jesus, I'm not going to do that. So I was very, very vehemently against a career in computer science. And I mean, there is a God. I do believe in a force acting in your life that is much larger than you, that has an account of what would make you happy than what you think would make you happy. And as it turns out, Shivi, I was getting my bachelor's and master's in computer science. I was in my master's program in 2000. I got in 2009, against a lot of debate that I had with my parents. And I'm like, fine, I'll settle. I'll just get a master's and be done with it. Midway into my program, my sister gets pregnant and she's in the US. And I have my first nephew coming to the world, so we had to come over to the US to see him. And during that trip, my sister knew that I hated the guts of computer science, and she's like, listen, you don't like computer science, I know it, and you've been yapping about doing something in communication studies. Why don't you talk to some professors when you're here? And that is an unfair advantage that I had, where I was here in the US, I was in Michigan, and I heeded my sister's advice, and I booked some appointments with professors saying that, hey, I wanted to stop by and see and understand what your program is, and just to understand if they have an appetite for ingesting a student who has no background in communication studies but wants to get a PhD. And again, I did not want to get a PhD. I was like, what is the path of least resistance? A master's. Let me just get that. But thank God my sister had that sage voice. She said that, first of all, dad is not going to pay shit for your degree. First of all, you're leaving computer science and you're going to communication studies. You're leaving science for sociology. You're leaving science for social science. It's almost like marrying out of your religion. It is as sacrilegious as that. And my dad is not going to go into debt funding this vagary that I had going on. So she said, PhD is going to allow you to pay for yourself. So get a PhD. If you don't like it, get a master's and get out. There are MS PhD programs. I was like, fine, I'm going to get a PhD. So that's what I did. Again, this goes to show that when we think about these huge milestones in our lives, I'm talking about PhD, I'm talking about marriage, I'm talking about even a green card for that matter, through these competitive categories like EB1, EB2, and IW, they seem so scary. They seem so scary. And it seems impossible when you think about it. And what I've realized by accomplishing multiple of these milestones, be it getting a PhD, be it getting a green card, be it writing a book, that every single daunting journey starts with a single step. And you don't have to see the entire road. All you need to do is, can you see this next step that you can take? And trust that with time, by putting one feet in front of the other, you are going to figure out the journey ahead. But if you start thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm getting married, I'm going to have children, and then I have to open the 529, and then we'll have all this like jhamela, you will never get married. You will never get a PhD. You will never start a journey because you're thinking in terms of 0 to 100. You don't. You just have to think about 0 to a 10, and then 10 to a 20, and then 20 to a 30. And that's what I did with my PhD, where, yeah, I got in with no understanding of what the expectations of a PhD program was. But slowly but surely, sure, it took me more time than others in my position. I faced more rejections and failures than others. But in due time, I did reach the finish line. And that's all that matters. Nobody's going to remember how fast you went and how young you went there. As long as you finish the job, you're good.
And again, like touching so many interesting topics here as well, Aditi, right? Really starting from your things falling into place, right? When you're really going with the flow and really enjoying the process. And that's where it is that the end goal is there, but if you're not enjoying the process, then what's the point? And I always think that, for example, you are hiking a big mountain, right? And you know that that the view from the top is going to be amazing, is going to be beautiful. You'll take, it's a 3 mile hike, you probably take 45 minutes, 1 hour, whatever, to reach at the top. But if you do not enjoy that process and you're staying at the top like what, 2 minutes, then you basically spent 99% of the time doing that hike not happy and not enjoying the process. And that's where you bring in so important perspectives. Number one, that definitely you have to be able to visualize where you want to go, what is it that you're wanting to create, because everything is created twice, once in our brains and once outside. And then of course, really driving through a fog where you can see only 10 meters ahead, but you have to be faith you have to have faith that there is going to be a path even emerging even after the fog. So it's so interesting and so important, and thank you so much for sharing that, Aditi. So Aditi, in terms of your communication studies, the PhD that you did, um, how arduous was that process of applying? Because I know a lot of women really think about applying to these PhD programs. So what are some, I would say, top three things that worked for you in terms of admits, and top three things that you could have done better so that you would have compounded that effect?
I'll answer the second one because in answering the second one, the first one is going to get answered because I did nothing correctly. Trust me when I say I'm not being humble. I'm just telling you how imperfect my process was. That even with this ignorance, I succeeded. So think about what would you do with the wisdom that you have? So the first thing that I would say when you're applying for a PhD program, and I see this trend right now. I'm talking especially about U.S. immigration that the situation with folks who are born in India is such that if you have a goal of being in the US permanently, that you need to qualify for this category of green cards called EB1, where it is a good thing. It can be an accelerant. It's not a necessity, but it's a good thing if you have a PhD. And some folks are making their decision based on that. What I mean by that is you're looking at a PhD as a hack for your immigration, and that is a recipe for disaster. If you are getting a PhD thinking that it's going to add a nice little doctor in front of your name and somehow it's going to accelerate your career and your green card, you're in for a world of surprise. The first thing I would say is even if you don't know why you're going to get a PhD, do your due diligence to understand what a PhD takes. And the first thing that you need to know what a PhD takes is it's not like a bachelor's or a master's. When you go from a bachelor's or a master's, bachelor's, think about you're taking on a scale of complex to not complex, easy to complex. Bachelor's degree on a 1 to 10, you're taking courses which are like 3 or 4. When you go for a master's, it's 5 to 7. And in my simplistic mindset, I thought, I mean, इतना ही पढ़ाई कर लिया है मास्टर्स में तो थोड़ा और पढ़ लेंगे बस like you know, I have to get like okay, I've done courses from 1 to 4, 5 to 7. This is just going to be 8 to 10. Fine, I'll handle it. I handled a master's in the same philosophy. What I realized is a PhD is not just regurgitation of knowledge. PhD is the production of knowledge. So you need to produce knowledge, and to produce knowledge, you need to do research. And research is a completely different skill set than a bachelor's or a master's needs. It is you're producing, you're an inventor. In a way, you're an entrepreneur. So the first thing that you need to know is a PhD requires you to develop a skill set that you have not developed before. So, giving yourself time. The second thing is you need to know who you're developing the skill with. So often, because we are Indians, we are very status heavy, right? Top 10. If you have to buy a toothpaste, also we'll buy the top rated Amazon toothpaste because we want to get the best of the best, right? Especially if you're spending money, which you should not be spending in a PhD program. You want to know the best. Like I'm not, if I'm giving you 5 years of my life, I want to work in the best. I have done that. I have absolutely done that because when I came to the US, I came in a PhD program at a smaller university in Ohio. And then, first year into the program, I got an email from a top ranked university asking me if I would like to transfer, because I'd already applied to them, but I didn't get funding. But they got back to me during my first year, and I got an opportunity to study in one of the top three universities in communication studies. And I'm like, absolutely, I will go, because if I'm getting a PhD, I'm gonna get it from the best place. And if I'm getting it from the best place, I'm getting it from the best professor. And I did that. I did that. That I went to a PhD program, which was the best, and I got the best professor. What I realized from experience is just because somebody is a good researcher doesn't automatically make them a good mentor. You need to find yourself a mentor who is invested in your growth. And what I mean by that is not just take you when you are a good finished product, helping you grow as a researcher. So the first is understand that if you have an appetite for research, because that's going to be an uphill climb. Number two, get a mentor who is going to assist you from level A to level B. And number three is understand you drive this bus. If you stop publishing, if you stop growing as a researcher, if you stop growing as a scholar, nobody is going to come and push you. But you are going to exhaust yourself away from the field. There's such a term in PhD called publish or perish. So you either keep publishing or you perish. So you have to be a self starter, and you have to keep going, because doing research is something else and publishing research is a whole different story, my friend. And in that way, to be honest with you, being from India helps, because we have such a thick skin. We are so used to being invalidated since we are children. I don't remember getting a participation prize for anything. As a matter of fact, when I got a 95 out of 100, the question, the comment was not, congratulations on the 95. It was lamenting that, man, like, if only you could have just gotten that five. Like, where did you do the mistake of a 5%? Like, you could have just gotten 100. We are never satisfied. And that's exactly what you will find out when publishing research. As a matter of fact, you'll find the same thing when you're doing your EB1s and for your green card, where doing something is not enough. You have to keep doing it. You have to outdo yourself every single point in time. This is exciting, but it's also very unnerving, and it's a recipe for burnout. And I have experienced burnout. And part of the reason why I left my career in academia, as a researcher, uh, especially, had equal parts to do with burnout, with me seeing some practices that I was not comfortable with, and also had outgrown the job. Know these before you get a PhD, and then get into it. Right, at
Yeah.
least know, so you're not surprised when you're encountering these challenges. You will get
Yeah.
over it, but just know that this is coming your way.
Yeah, yeah, that's again very interesting perspective, Aditi, that you're sharing with us, and you're touching upon very, very important topics here, right? That your bachelor's and master's is more on consumption, but PhD is about creation. It's more about what you have created, what you're bringing to life, and that is what your corporate world is as well about, right? That's where the jobs also start. That now you have learned enough, you have enough tools, but then how do you use these tools to create something meaningful, make money, or do any business likey things, right? So it's such an interesting perspective that you bring that and again, being from Indian background helps us because we have that thick skin of being invalidated, but at the same time we do not have that mindset, or majority of the students do not have that mindset of critical thinking, where it's where it is really, really important to look at an argument and really start to break it down as to why it can be correct or not be correct. And it's just not numbers at the end of the day, right? So it's all also about the story that those numbers are telling us. So thank you so much for sharing that, Aditi. Now I have a very interesting question for you. I think we're just backing up to your bachelor's. So you spent 4 years with your computer science degree, you did your master's there, and then you moved on to a PhD program, which was in a completely different field. I almost think of it as a sunk time cost fallacy, right? Where time is gone. Like you cannot use this anymore. You've created some skills, you've gotten some skills. So, how did you become comfortable with the idea that okay, what's done is done. I've used my 5 years in a way that I didn't want to use it. It was not giving me happiness. And I'm okay at this point in my life moving on to something else where I can see that my peers, right, might be doing some high paying jobs or something, right, in a comp science. So, how did you really navigate that thought process as to that, okay, 5 years done, but this is not for me?
This answer may sound very esoteric. I could give you a rational answer of like, yeah, what's done is done, and I kind of like, use that to leverage in my job, which I did. I did all of that. Like, I used my computer science background to bolster the fact that I'm getting a PhD, where I'm looking at the impact of technology on human communication. And if you look at the sunk cost in terms of me investing 7 years of my life in academia and starting from a fairly like independent contractor position in academia, in industry, where if I would have put the same amount of time, I would have been like, what, vice president, I don't know, director, heck, even CTO, who knows, right? We These are all could haves. And I can give you that answer, but I won't give you that answer because I have I have been blessed to have a very strong faith base where I don't think anything, and it has taken me time to get to this position, don't get me wrong. I was not born this way, but there have been series of incidents in my life very much related to faith that has given me the belief to the core that nothing that is happening in my life is out of script. Everything has a purpose. Everything has a purpose. And yeah, I might sound like very Bhagavad Gita over here, but when you think about like purpose, or when you think about, oh, this is not in line with what I want to do, there is so much desire. There is so much desire attached to it, where imagine if I did what I wanted to do, right? My identity would be ingrained in it. If I failed in that, which I would, right? Every if failure is a part of it. Failing in something you don't care about versus failing in something you care about deeply, where your identity is ingrained in it, it's very different. But in me doing things that I didn't think I wanted to do, but I was doing it anyway, instead of vilifying that and thinking that it's time lost, it has developed a very crucial muscle in me, where I have started looking at work as work. That this is a work that is in front of me. This is a task that is in front of me. Do I want to do it? Not really, but I've been given this task and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, to the absolute best of my ability, and I'm going to excel in it, no matter the job. Even, for example, right now, I'm working in a company that I never thought I would work for, right? I mean, when I transferred from academia to industry, I went from doing research in online dating to doing user research. The best fit for me was to work in a Hinge or a Tinder or a Bumble. I really tried. But guess what? The job that I got isn't an extremely tech. Like, think about tech and think about the techiest of tech. I am talking about the techiest of tech companies, where I'm talking about like APIMs, hubs. I don't know anything about anything in this. But the fact that I am here, instead of being that 10-year-old Aditi who thought, oh my God, I hate myself. Like, why am I doing computer science? Yada, yada, yada. Instead of throwing a hissy fit, and I'm like, listen, this is a unique opportunity that has been given to me. Sure, it doesn't make sense to me, but if only I keep myself open to this, I don't know what this is going to lead me to. So let me do the job that I have in front of me to the best of my ability, with the faith that if I do this good enough, I will land in a place where I need to be.
So many, again, interesting perspectives, Aditi. And I think this is your PhD and research that you have done so far, right? And you're so well articulating all the thoughts that you have about, because when we come to India, right, and Indian women and Indian mindset and all of that, there is a certain taboo associated to a certain age, right? And that taboo for Indian women happens to be a little earlier than Indian men, is how I perceive it. And whenever, like, even growing up, right, I thought that by 30, if I'm not the CEO of the best company in the world, then I would have failed at life, right? So that's the mindset that you kind of grow up with. And at 30, either you make it or you don't make it, right? Depending on whatever your yardstick of success is, and that yardstick can be very, very insane for any matter, if you continue to go on that yardstick and continue to benchmark yourself against that, and you live to be, say, 80, then you're kind of wasting away your 50 years, just lamenting that 30 तक ये नहीं किया यार, right? So, and अब age हो गई है, अब कुछ नहीं कर सकते. And I've seen this with Indian women, especially. For example, I have kids, right? And at least for a year, 2 years, because of that mindset, I'm thinking abhi settled ho gaye, right? Now I can't do anything more with my life, and now this is what it is, and it's going to be like this. But it doesn't have to be. And you bring in like, such unique perspectives that you're changing feels, right? And you're changing it with complete faith, and with the intent of doing your job well, that the next door is going to open up for you. And you don't really put all these goals against these numbers in terms of ages, that इस एज तक ये नहीं हुआ तो फिर कोई जिंदगी का कोई मतलब नहीं है, so it's so interesting coming from you.
I mean, honestly, to be honest with you, Shivi, I have like put my bar for myself so low because had I had all the things that I planned for worked out, I would have not be where I am right now. My biggest to the like G Jan say, the hope that I had back in 2004 or 5 was to become an RJ, because that was the time like Radio Mirchi, Red FM was coming up, and I was so fascinated by the fact that somebody could use just their voice to enthrall an audience. And I like G Jan say I tried to become an RJ. Like I remember going to I think Big FM, which was the FM channel from Reliance. I remember like yesterday that these are the two RJs who like threw crumbs at me and like told me that I might get a show someday. So I used to like sit outside their studio, look at them like hosting the show. I'm sitting outside, waiting as a waiter, hoping that someday I'll get in. But imagine what if that dream would have turned to be true. I would have still been an RJ. People would have shut me off. Like I get pissed off with RJs right now because my gosh, just let me listen to my music. Right now it's the time of Spotify, etc. There's no for me. I didn't see a foreseeable future in RJ, but wonder what that would have worked out. I would have still been probably I would have been an RJ in Calcutta. I was a professor in New York City. There is a big difference, and that happened because I'd never even had a plan, and there was some god out there knowing that this is going to make you happy versus that. So all of this is to say that if my heart was not open, if I kept resisting, if I kept manifesting what I really needed, I wonder and I shudder thinking how many doors of opportunities I would have closed on because I was so aggressive on this one vision that I had for my life, which I think would make me happy. So that humility gives me hope, and that humility keeps me grounded that yeah, I am my age right now, and I have reached to this point I would have never reached if I had my plan. So worst case scenario, whoever is controlling my life is supersizing my plans to begin with. So I'll just keep trusting because the guy on top clearly knows what he's doing. I have no idea. So I'm putting one foot in front of the other, and changing my perspective in life. Instead of saying that, man, I'm doing something that I'm not supposed to do, well, keep doing it. You're going to know, before you know it, you're going to be doing things that you want to do that you would have never realized if you didn't do this one thing that you were so resistant to.
Definitely, Aditi. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And so interesting that RJ was like the cool thing
Big
back in
thing.
four,
And can
five,
I be
six,
honest
right?
with you? Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
I I actually got a job offer from Radio Mirchi in New Jersey in 2022 to be an RJ, and तब तक I was like so done क्योंकि आता नहीं यार शिवी वैसे like देवी और सज्जनों welcome, I'm like वैसा वाला है ही नहीं यार. I'm funny but I'm not that slapstick funny, like ऐसा वाला acting तो like मेरे से होगा नहीं. Like I was like, thank God, God closed that door on me, because अगर ये करती रहती तो मैं खुद को ही कोसती रहती कि यार अच्छा I wanted this and now I have to do this gimmicky version of myself. Jesus, I shudder thinking about that. So good that that plan went away.
You do sound very, very nice, Aditi. So, you know, the voice is really there, and I think jokes to ask सकते हैं. So definitely, if you want to pursue this just as a side thing and just want to try it
करूंगी.
out,
maybe I'll start radio. सुनना भी तो चाहिए कोई.
it will be RJ Dr. Aditi, right?
आरजे,
Or
ओहो, नाम सुन के बंद कर देंगे लोग. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, Aditi, now moving on to a topic that I think is very close to your heart, and this is where you're building a large community of Indians living in the US, where you rarely talk about your struggles with, say, the immigration status. And just for the audience, right now we are sitting in the US having this conversation with Aditi, and if you are a person who's born in India, right? People born in India, if you apply for your permanent residence or green card via your employer, which can be EB2 or EB3 category, the wait time is about 130 years, which means you will be dead by the time you get your green card. And just to give you context, when I, well, when my priority date was 2017, which meant that I would get my green card in about 100 years, I thought that my daughter, who was just born in 2017, would be able to file for me when she's 21. So that might be the quickest way for me to get a green card. Now there is another category, which is the employer based category 1, also known as rock star visa. I only thought that only Priyanka Chopra is able to get that. So but Aditi here, she qualified under EB1A. So Aditi, I just want to start with congratulating you, of course, right? And really thinking and being a trailblazer in that journey where you demonstrate to us that it's that category is not just if you're a Nobel Prize winner or if you're Priyanka Chopra. It even people who have substantial work that can be demonstrated as contribution to their field of work, they can be eligible for that category. So I want to start there, Aditi. Like, um, how did you think about that you should apply for this category? What made you think that?
Knowing what you know now about me, do you think I thought of it? I never thought of it. I was never my goal. Take a wild guess who must have thought of it and pushed it.
um, from our conversation so far, it might have been your sister.
My sister, my sister. Oh God, I mean, thank God I'm the younger one, because had I been the older one, my younger sister would have never stood a chance. But my sister, she is. I mean, oh my gosh, God bless her heart. She is the mother in my life. My mom is my friend, but my sister is my mom, and she kept pushing. Like, she's the one who told me about getting coming to the US. She's the one who gave me the foresight of like getting a PhD and getting funding. She's the one who told me about getting on the case of my employer to even start my EB1 process. And she's the one who told me about, listen, you have this job and you fulfill the basic requirements, you need to push for this category. And if not for her, none of this would have happened. None of this would have started, let's say. Of course, I'm not recusing myself. I'm not that humble of a person. I'm very self conceited. I'm very narcissistic. I'm like, yes, I did it. I did the work. But it's her nudge that got me started. And to be honest with you, Shivi, I remember going to my therapist. Since 2019, I went to my therapist. And I have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in crying, right? That I feel like a fraud. I'm not good enough for this category of green card. I don't have what it takes, because when I graduated from my PhD, if I tell you how I graduated from my PhD, you're going to be like, wow, like that is great. When I graduated from my PhD, my research was cited in over 90 media outlets in 11 countries, including Cosmopolitan, The Telegraph. You think about it, my research is cited there. Huffington Post, Washington Post, Newsweek, uh, b- all the other, even Playboy. Playboy had cited my my research. So my research was cited heavily. But for me to get to that position, I was almost fired for my PhD. I was the black sheep of the PhD program because remember, I came into a PhD program which was very high stakes with no preparation, working with a professor who was not vested in helping me grow. So I did face a whole bunch of roadblocks, but this one win did not undo the level of imposter and fraudulence that I had gone through. So think about yourself as, I'm just going to be very mean with this reference, but think about yourself as Tushar Kapoor, right? Like flop, 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 one major hit. Yes, it's a hit, but does it really change the way you perceive yourself? In your mind, you're thinking this is a fluke, right? In your mind, you're thinking, oh, I don't deserve this. I just got it essay, right? Same way I thought about my professor job in New York as well. To the outside eye, yes, Dr. Aditi Paul cited in so and so. Yes, she is a tenure track. That's a big one in academic world, like tenure track professor in New York City. That's huge. But in my mind, I knew that, man, I just got my PhD barely through the skin of my teeth. And after joining my professorship program, I was not being able to publish research. My research was getting rejected left and right. So I thought I was a one trick pony. I thought I was vanilla ice. Ek hit de diya, bas ho gaya. Right? So I had to fight constantly. The only thing that helped me in this journey, Shivi, was waking up every single day, every single day trying to do research, every single day writing research, every single day picking myself up one more time and trying one more time. And that journey was hard. That journey was hard because not only did I had to grow myself as a researcher, I also, just like you would also know, had to constantly advocate for myself to the employer. I had to advocate myself to the finish line, and that is a tough, tough process to go. But through this process, what I have realized is all these battles that we fight under closed doors. And on to the common eye, you're like, you're doing so much to maintain a visa. Right? Like, and then to folks back home in India, we seem like यूएस का दलाल, राइट? कि अच्छा इतना इतना आपको ग्रीन कार्ड के लिए शौक है, right? But you don't know the implications of that. It's not just about a visa, it's not just about a green card. It's losing everything that you have worked for so hard in this country, and I'm not even factoring in a family right now. So it's not just a fight for a visa, it's not just a fight for a green card, it's the fight to take control of your life. And just because person XYZ does not get it doesn't mean we should not be talking about it. And in building this community, my hope is to A, communicate through my content and my support that you don't have to be an Einstein to start. You can outwork your doubts, outwork them. And number two, that this is a big deal. When your American colleague talks to you, through this awareness, they should know that this person is not just an average Joe, that they have fought battles and they are resilient and they are hardworking. That these questions, when you go to an interview, should not even be asked. If you're an immigrant, this comes as an assurity that this person knows how to deal with uncertainty. This person knows how to deal with failure. This person knows how to deal with stress and still show up at work and deliver. That's my hope in building this community.
Yeah, yeah. And so rightly said, Aditi. I say generally that's how I think about it when I was on a visa back in the day. Roti kapda or makan in India, roti kapda makan visa in
Exactly.
US, right? So the fourth thing always has to be there, and which reminds me, very interesting that one of my friends, very very close friends, who was on their H1 for a very long time, 15 years, and then one day their H1 was rejected, like out of nowhere, and their priority date is not current, so they had to relocate back to India in like 10 days, because once you're refused in H1B, like you have to go back, and it's in middle of the year, November, where their kids are in school, right? And now these kids, all they know is American education system. Now they will be taken out of this and they have to start in Indian school middle of the year. So, how challenging it must be for, say, 11-year-old or a 7 or 8-year-old to adapt like that. And it's just so unfair. at
It's very unfair. It's very unfair. And I've met enough people who are like, ज्यादा से ज्यादा क्या ही हो जाएगा, like, चले जाएंगे घर पे. No. I have too much self respect, to be honest with you, Shivi. I have too much self respect to be played by any system like that. That's what bothered me. There's such a thing in psychology called cognitive dissonance, that if you have certain values that you hold dear and your lived experiences doesn't reflect that value, then you feel like a fraud. And to be honest with you, maybe that is the reason why I felt more like a fraud living this dual life, where outside I'm all independent. कि अदिति को देखो, 11 countries she is like, backpacking, कितनी आज़ादी से रह ली है life में. And then I am going only when my H1B is stamped. ये कैसा लाइफ है भाई? लाइक, अगर आज़ादी तुमको प्यारी है, quoting रंग दे बसंती, तो हर जगह प्यारी करो उसको, right? So if, to be honest with you, I really think me being a backbencher helped me in this fight. That if I was somebody who is like, नहीं अच्छे से पढ़ाई करेंगे, फर्स्ट क्लास फर्स्ट बेंच में बैठेंगे, सब सही से पढ़ेंगे, राइट? अगर वैसा होती तो आई वुड हैव कंप्लाइड विद द सिस्टम, लाइक ठीक है चलो H1B जो हो रहा है होने दो. इतना फाइट नहीं करती, इतनी लाइक सीरियसली नहीं ले लेती चीज को, कि नहीं, आई वॉन्ट टू लिव फ्री, आई डोंट वॉन्ट टू बी लाइक, just प्लीज प्लीज सर दे दो, राइट? हक से रहना है अगर रहना है. एंड दिस इज समथिंग दैट आई लर्न फ्रॉम माय डैड. आई मीन ही केम टू द US in 1970s. Bari bari, all of us has come to the US, by the way, right now. So he came to the US because there is a token uncle who's there in the US from all Indian families. I also had a token uncle, and the token uncle thought that he was going to be the only token uncle in the US until we came and destroyed his dream. So my dad came to meet my dad's brother. And my dad, back in the 1970s, and he's a dark skinned Indian man with a very thick accent. And at that time he said that, I've been to Europe, I've been to the US, and I felt that the US is the only country where you can live like you belong with your head held high, that you can be a hyphenated American. He didn't know the challenges. He didn't know how unwelcoming immigration system is in the US, but
Mhm.
that rang very much in my mind, that सर उठा के क्या मैं जी रही हूँ यहाँ पे? मैं नहीं जी रही हूँ यहाँ पे सर उठा के, तो मुझे सर उठा के जीना है. एंड ग्रीन कार्ड became a pathway to that. It was not the end goal, it was the source that would take me to the end goal, that is this.
Yeah, the means to getting to where you want to do, right? The freedom
Exactly.
that's
Exactly.
that you want. So that's very interesting, Aditi, all of your entire journey and then all the hurdles that you shared us with, and really that imposter syndrome kicking in. And at the same time, what I also heavily feel that at the same time you have to continue to advocate for yourself, because for for everybody else you are just a statistic, right? They will do a research and they will
Hmm?
say Indians will take 130 years to get a green card. And
790,000 Indians. You're just
right,
one of them.
yeah, and then they'll go to sleep, right? They'll have their dinner, they'll watch TV, they'll go to sleep. Like it does not matter for them, but for us, it's our whole life. And
It's our whole
this
life.
is the only thing that matters to us, the freedom to live. And people tell me that you're going to have green card, whenever your daughter is 21, so then you can become a permanent resident. And then I'm like, I'll be 50, number one. I might not have the same desires anymore, which I have right now. I might not have the same wants anymore, the same kind of zeal or energy to do anything anymore. So I don't want to live my life on a standby mode. That कल आएगा तो जिएंगे, समर आएगा तो जिएंगे.
And I know, Shivi, that the other thing that people think about, especially like when I also talk about my green card, is you think you're getting a green card because you want to live permanently in the US. That's not the case for me. I still don't know if I want to live in the US permanently or not. Right, I have my family back home, and India is on the come up. India is hot material right now. I don't want to let go of India in like jo pehle hota tha, like in the 60s and the 70s when people came over here. I have seen that life also, Shivi, through my uncle, where ना घर का ना घाट का रह जाते हैं, क्योंकि यहाँ पे आके we want to like acclimatize, so we sever all contacts back home. But then when your children grow up and you're empty nesters, now you're all by yourself, you've not acclimatized enough to have a support system. Now you go home, and then your family also doesn't know who you are anymore. So where do you belong? And I don't want to be like that. We live in such an incredible time of hyper connectivity that we no longer have to choose. We no longer have to choose. My ideal life would be both. I do not think of it as an and or I think of it as an and. Like यहाँ भी चाहिए वहाँ भी चाहिए हर जगह चाहिए मुझे, and I don't want to let go of one to choose the other. I do not ever want to get into a position where I have to choose between my career and my family, because that's not a fair comparison to make. That is not a fair choice to make. And if other folks are not being asked to make it, why am I being asked to make it? That was my goal. That was honestly the reason why, where I wanted this green card, so that I never had to choose, never had to choose, that I can call both India and the US my home base.
Yep, yep. Definitely resonates so much, Aditi, and thank you so much for sharing that journey. So I do have a quick rapid fire for
Do
you,
it.
right? And you have to give me the first thing that comes to your mind, just to lighten up the mood, right? So, uh,
Wonderful.
so okay, so we'll go through the questions and then
Okay.
we'll start now. Okay.
Awesome.
Uh, Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Fame or money?
Both.
You can't choose both. You have to choose
Oh,
one.
peace. I want peace.
The most important thing in your life.
Faith.
The most important person in your life.
My mom.
Mountains or beaches?
Oh, mountains.
Name your favorite movie.
Yeah, DDLJ.
What's your regular Starbucks order?
The cheapest one. Starbucks is not taking my money. It's kidding. I like misto with the whipped cream on top.
What's your favorite book?
Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert.
What's your motto in life?
Whatever is happening in your highest good.
Favorite TV series?
Modern Family currently.
And the last one, you have to put in order of importance,
Okay.
like fastest finger first. Success, money, career, health, family.
Health, family, career, money, success.
Okay, so that's all for the rapid fire. Thank you so much for participating um, and being so honest with your answers.
Oh, thank you.
As I was talking about the statistics, right? That we're just a statistic for a lot of people that we speak with. And I always take my own example where I was talking to somebody in visa and immigration myself, and I told them that I'm going to come back on an H1, but I'm still going to apply for an EB1C. And they told me, you can't do that. And I knew for 100% that I could do that. So I went through that route and I still was able to do my EB1C, right? So and you're building this very interesting community of Indians in US and trying to identify a more feasible immigration pathway for all of us who are here. So in that process, what are some interesting steps that you are presently taking that you would like to talk about?
The first step is obviously more awareness, so that what you're talking about right now, there's such an inconsistency of information that we get, that somebody's saying this to me, somebody's saying that to me, and most often it's like mere dost ne kaha hai, mere dost ke bhabi ke chachi ke bhanje ne kaha hai, ye wo. Like we hear all through these grapevines. So what the first spoke, or the first MVP, or the first goal that I'm trying to achieve is democratizing this awareness of information, that if somebody is making a decision right now sitting in India about coming to the US, that they have the knowledge, because knowledge is power. Once you know, you decide, but don't come in blindsided, because that's what happened to a lot of us, right? You were blindsided, that you didn't even know there's such a thing like EB1C if some of your friends had not talked about it. This should be at the back of our hands. This should be a manual. that you know this for sure. There should be some of those like cricket instructions ki no ball ye sab, like leg before wicket. It should be as accessible to us, and as common language to us as possible. If we can know what an F1 is and what an I-20 is and what an H-1B is, then we should be knowing what a perm is, what a final merits determination is, what a Kazarian is. That's the level of awareness that I would love for our community to have. And when you're trying to create these solutions, it cannot just be a one-sided driven approach. And that's where I am experiencing such wonderful levels of gratification, Shivi, because as I have built this journey, it was just me. You're the crazy one who's talking about your green card journey and your immigration. But then people are starting to notice your work. And through that, I have had immigration lawyers reach out to me. And mind you, these are all people who we have shit talked about. I don't know if you've shit talked about your immigration lawyer. I've shit talked about my immigration lawyer, and you're like, this person is not responding to me. They hate me. They're trying to screw me over. The incompetence, and we villainize the other person so much. But they too are human. I'm not saying that there are not bad players out there, but there are good players too, and they too have their own set of lives, their own set of experiences that they're going through. So to be able to talk to them and see the picture from their eyes creates that sense of common understanding, that okay, what can I do from myself that is causing you frustration, and what can you do from your side that is causing us frustration? How can we work collaboratively? So that's just one example. And through that beautiful journey, I have come across folks that I never thought I would come across. Just as an example, not just come across, but folks who have actively given me PTSD. So I, in the morning today, I talked to a visa officer from the US Department of State. So you've been to a visa interview in India, right? Like, you remember taking that ticket and going into this insulated cabin, and then there's this very scary visa officer sitting on the other side. We all have been there, and we take this little jhola of information that we have, and we tell them ki bhaiya please de do wahan se, like O1 visa, O1 petition approve hoke aaya hai, aap please reject mat kar dena. Like, we know those visa officers. I talked to that visa officer today. I talked to one of those visa officers who has accepted these visas and who has rejected these visas. And guess what she told me? She's like, she went to her boss and she said, you know what, I had to reject this person's visa because if only they would have given me the information that I needed, their visa would have been approved. So they're not monsters sitting there to actively screw you. They too have their things that they need to adhere to because they're trying to uphold the law, because their ass is going to be on fire. So the more bridges that we create as we are building this solution, that's the path to success. Not villainizing the other person, not thinking that the other person hum log ko to, like, they will never understand us. Have we had a conversation with them? Right, have they had a conversation with us? So not just creating that awareness, not just getting people ready for their visas, but creating a collective effort by engaging everybody who is touched by this experience, that we're all in this together and we should collectively work together, because when everybody wins, that's when the real solution happens.
Yeah. And definitely so much. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Aditi. And I think what you're doing is great work by really bringing all this information to users in a language that they can understand, and also something that they see that you have done this before, so they know that this there is a possibility that they can do this too, right? And they can lead a life where they can be free to, like, they don't have to be tied to a job to stay in the US. So basically, that's where it comes down to, that you can be in the US only as long as you're employed by your employer. That gives the employers a slight edge in terms of
A
hiring
huge
H1,
edge. Oh,
right?
George. Yeah, yeah. Whew. So
Yeah,
much control on employers. It's not enough that we depend on them for our paycheck. Now we have to depend on them for the whole life.
yeah.
But thank you again for saying that. I'm genuinely excited to be building this, and let's see where things go.
Yeah. And Aditi, you have also written a book. So what's the name of the book? I will flash it on the screen for the.
Oh gosh, it is
Yeah.
so different than
Yeah.
what we have been talking about. Where is the book? Oh, this is not related at all.
Yeah. Oh,
The
this is.
current this is the current collegiate hookup culture. It is a book about hookups and Gen Z and sex. This is what the book is. It's no long. It is not at all related. It's
It's
from my
from your.
professorship days, and like, yeah, but you know what, like, one of the chapters that I had written in this book, because
Yeah.
I wanted to see like how the culture of sex and intimacy is changing
Hmm.
in college campuses, now that we have dating apps. And there's this one chapter that I had written. It's
Yeah.
called International Student. And I saw that, well, you're talking about American college campuses, but you don't have any record of what the international student experience is. But this is again, like, writing this book and doing research for this book showed me the erasure of our voice at
Yeah.
every step of the way. So yeah, ye jazba of capturing international student voice has been there. uh, Now it's ubhar ke niklofying on LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing all this important information with us, Aditi. For all of the viewers who are interested in seeing what Aditi is doing in her content journey, or even booking a session with her or talking to her, you can check out the link in the description, or it will be there somewhere you'll find it. So do check it out. And thank you so much for being with us here today, Aditi. I think what you shared is very, very insightful. We talked about such wonderful topics, and these topics continue to come up. The topics like, I do not like computer science at all. How can I change my field? Can I get a PhD in a completely different field, unrelated field? What are some mistakes that as a PhD I should not make? What is the mindset that I require? And of course, the immigration question that you really answered for students who are really thinking about US as their destination, and what are some things that they should keep in mind as well. So thank you so much for sharing all of that, Aditi. Really, really my pleasure to have you with us today.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much, Shivi.
Thank you, Aditi.